Tuia I runga, tuia I raro, tuia I waho, tuia I roto. Tuia te here tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. Haumie, huie, tae kie. Kia ora tātou and welcome to the Waiheke Collective Pestival online. It's really wonderful to have everybody with us this evening. Our Pestival this year has moved online. As many of you know, we cannot join in person, unfortunately, for the Pestival this year, but we are really excited to be able to host this online for 4 different discussions over a period of 4 weeks. This evening, we have the kaupapa or the discussion of love our pets, love our environment, love conservation. And we're really excited to welcome our guest speakers, Dr. Imogen Bassett, who is the Biodiversity Principal Advisor for Auckland Council, and also Brian Shields, who is Biodiversity Advisor, Pest Detection Dogs. We're going to, first of all, hear from them with a presentation, first of all from Imogen, and then also from Brian. And then following those 2 presentations, we will also be hearing from Glenda, who has joined us from WISCA, which is an amazing organisation here on Waiheke, doing a lot of work for our pets and our animals. Karen Saunders from Waiheke Native Bird Rescue, who also does incredible work for our taonga species and our wildlife. And Alex, who is from Vets on Waiheke, our only vets on the island. So thank you all very much for joining us, and thank you to all of our watchers for being here this evening as well. Just to give you a little bit of a heads up in terms of the next 3 weeks after this and the different discussions that we will be having. So next week we have on the 28th of October, we have the rat genetics talk, which if you go to the Te Korowai or Waiheke Facebook page, and then also the Waiheke Collective Facebook page, you'll be able to find a little bit more information about that. Following that, on the Thursday, the 4th of November, is a discussion on saving our iconic trees. And then on Thursday, the 11th of November, there will be a discussion on digital tools for community conservation. And so the Waiheke Collective Pestival will be running over a 4-week period every Thursday from 6 p.m. till 7:30 p.m. So now I'm just going to invite Imogen, if you would like to just give us a little introduction. I won't attempt to introduce you and Brian. I will invite you to introduce yourself, and then Brian, I'll invite you to introduce yourself, and then Imogen's going to start with her presentation. Kia ora.
Kia ora, ngā mihi nui ki a koe, me ngā mana whenua o te motu. Thank you very much for having me here this evening. Yeah, my name is Imogen Bassett. I'm the Principal Advisor Biosecurity at Auckland Council. So by training, I'm an ecologist, but specialise in introduced species and their impacts in Aotearoa, particularly on our Indigenous biodiversity. Yeah, thank you.
Kia ora, Imogen. Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Shields. I'm a Biosecurity Advisor, Pest Detection Dogs for Auckland Council, and I run the, coordinate the dog program for the Auckland Council around the conservation dogs that we have.
Kia ora, Brian. Excellent. Okay, Imogen, we'll just invite you to get us started with your presentation this evening. Also, just to let you know for attendees that are on here watching, if you have any questions, please do ask them in the chat. And then there will be a period after each presentation, and then also for the panel discussion for you to be able to, we will be putting those questions to the speakers. Kia ora, Imogen.
Thank you. Sorry, I just with all the various things going on, lost my unmute button there. Can you see my screen all right now?
Yes, that's great.
Fabulous, thank you. Yeah, also my contribution to this evening is really focused on cats and looking at some of the kind of win-win ways in which we can both protect our cats and also be protecting our Indigenous wildlife at the same time. Bear with me. So yeah, and just to, I guess, just to introduce myself a little bit more. I'm a cat lover myself. I've owned a lot of cats in my lifetime. I don't own any these days because a few years ago discovered that one of the primary causes of my really chronic hay fever is actually that I'm really allergic to cats. So don't see myself living in a household with cats anymore. I'm content with the family of tui that make my backyard their home as well. But you know, have had and loved a lot of cats as members of my family over the years. I went into the area that I work in because I'm not only a cat lover, but just a general really strong interest in wildlife and Indigenous biodiversity as well. And so, you know, like many of you listening, potentially like to spend my leisure time out in the outdoors, camping, tramping, that sort of thing. And one of the great privileges of my life a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, luckily, got to have a trip to the Galapagos Islands, and that was just an incredible once in a lifetime experience. And one of the things that it really sort of hammered home to me was these amazing sort of almost clouds of seabirds, and it's a real window into the kind of opportunity that we could have here with our own seabird islands if we protect our Indigenous biodiversity more. And I certainly, you know, when I visit Waiheke from my home in urban Auckland, I'm struck even with that difference that there are a whole lot of Indigenous species that are really, it's quite noticeable to me coming to your island that they're much more thriving and really sort of noticeable and present. But despite that, we also know that a lot of them are really vulnerable to cat predation, and that continues to be a significant pressure for many of them, including the ones pictured here, alongside, of course, a whole range of other pressures that they face as well. So it's not just cats by any means. So, you know, we love our Indigenous biodiversity, but we also, many of us love our cats as well. And New Zealand, in fact, has probably one of the highest cat ownership rates in the world, and cats are our most common pet companion animal in the country. And so Aucklanders, around a third of Aucklanders have a cat, and most commonly they say that they have one for that companionship value. And around 4 out of 5 cat owners say that they consider their cats to be a part of their family. And so that's something that I think is really important to be keeping front and centre of any conversations we're having about cats, is that you know, we're not just talking about a sort of an add-on thing to people's lives. They're actually, you know, a really important emotional connection and family member. And the thing that we often hear, you know, these sort of polarised conversations about cat management and wildlife protection in the media. Often, you know, they like stories that are quite conflict-ridden, but actually, what we find is that many of the ways in which we can keep our wildlife safe are actually the same things that we want people to be doing to keep their cats safe as well. So, contrary to what we might be hearing, there's actually a really great opportunity for a win-win thing here. So, of course, there's a whole range of things that we like people to be doing to be looking after their cats and wildlife. I'm just going to touch on a few of them here tonight, what we know about them, what we know about the current rates, motivators, barriers, that sort of thing, and a little bit of the sort of overarching, what do we know about the science of behaviour change and communication when we're talking about these things. So probably none of you will be surprised to know that desexing is the most common sort of responsible pet ownership behaviour at the moment in New Zealand. So it's most people do. About 93% of domestic cats are desexed nationally, But despite that, that small proportion that aren't desexed is still really contributing to having far too many kittens that don't have homes, and that's just because they can have so many young over their lifetime. And so we see this reflected in where people are getting their cats from, and so a large proportion of people get their cats from from a neighbour, a rescue centre, that sort of thing. And certainly most of the cats that I've owned in my lifetime, we didn't really set out to be cat owners as such. It's just that maybe a local stray had a litter under the neighbour's deck and somebody needed to take them in, and that sort of thing. And that's a really common story that you hear. So if we're thinking about how we lift those people who have those cats that aren't desexed, and the people that might be looking after them, to really increase those rates of desexing, what we see is that cost is most commonly the top barrier that's cited there, and that's really reflected in the we see really uneven levels of desexing around the place. So communities that are lower socioeconomic communities tend to have lower rates of desexing and higher rates of stray animals as a result. And so I'm really excited to be able to announce tonight. And we've got Alex here from Vets on Waiheke, and we've got a really exciting new collaboration coming up where we're able to remove cost as a barrier for desexing for a bit of a short window of time. We're going to be offering free snip and chip for cats on Waiheke as a partnership between Vets on Waiheke and Auckland Council. That's really exciting, and it mirrors the kind of work that we've been trying to do around the region with Auckland Council, trying to help cat owners, particularly in places that are near threatened species sites, to be able to have access to desexing when that's needed. Another responsible pet ownership behaviour that we want to see more of is microchipping. It's a much newer technology, and so people aren't as familiar with it, and it's not nearly as common as desexing is, but it is really rapidly becoming much more the norm. So rates of microchipping more than doubled between 2011 and 2016 in that 5-year period. So it's just becoming really standard. And the great thing about microchipping is its ability to reunite animals with their owners. So you see these incredible stories of cats that have somehow managed to make it into the boot of a car, or I don't know what they do, but they manage to get themselves tens of kilometres away from home, and are able to be reunited with their owners because of having a microchip. And this kind of benefit was really particularly underscored in the Christchurch earthquakes, where we see that about 85% of microchipped pets were able to be reunited with their owners, whereas only about 15% of unchipped cats were. So there's, I think, something we don't often appreciate is the impact of those sorts of natural disasters on pet owners, and this an incredible tool that can actually be really, really impactful in that kind of situation. From a conservation point of view as well, we also really value animals being microchipped, because it does mean that if we're doing chirping work and we pick up an owned cat, that we're able to identify really easily that it is owned and make sure that it's returned home to its owner. But in terms of barriers and motivators to microchipping, we see that really by far and away the thing that is the biggest barrier to people taking up this behaviour is that they don't see that it's necessary, they don't see what the point is. And so I think that's a really important thing for us to be focused on trying to amplify these kinds of situations, like when they get lost for whatever reason, and for people to be able to have the understanding of actually how much benefit you can get from microchipping. Another thing that's got a win-win for both cats and wildlife is keeping cats at home, whether that's inside the house or maybe it's just on the property. There's a whole lot of different ways that people can do that, and maybe it's overnight or even 24/7. So the obvious benefits for cats are in terms of that safety, and I know I will be like many other people in having lost a couple of animals to traffic accidents, and it's incredibly distressing, I recognise that you know, if I had been aware at the time that actually it was possible for me to keep the cat at home more effectively than I was aware of, that might have ended differently. And of course, it also keeps wildlife safe as well. But we'll be really conscious from being at home ourselves a lot more than normal at the moment. That's something that, you know, we need good enrichment, and to make sure that cats' well-being is really looked after. So it's certainly not a matter of just kind of locking them indoors and not doing anything different. We really need people to be focusing on making sure that their welfare needs are met as well. And so in terms of what we know about people's motivation to keep cats at home, we've seen that people really are motivated by that safety element. And a lot of people are saying that they feel quite anxious when their cats are outside and they don't know where they're going and they don't know what risks they might be taking. But there's this really pervasive social norm that we're up against as a real barrier to people translating that fear into actually keeping their cats at home. And that's this real sense that what it means to be a cat owner in Aotearoa is to let your cat roam, and that's natural, it's what we're expected to do, it's what everybody thinks that we think we should be doing. That's actually, you know, that's a real cultural construct that we've created for ourselves, and certainly in many other parts of the world, cats live quite commonly and happily in indoor environments. So, you know, that's something for us to be really aware of. A couple of the other key barriers to keeping cats at home include people just not knowing how to, thinking it's really unfeasible and not having the kind of tools and knowledge, and also really underestimating actually the extent to which those risks still exist. And there's a great study done by Heidi Kikulis, who was at Victoria University at the time. She, as part of this cat tracker thing, which is also overseas as well, she put GPS collars on quite a lot of owned cats and had a look at where they went. And their owners really underestimated how far they were roaming. So you see some of the cats illustrated here having a good snooze at home, but actually there are the corresponding maps of how far they were actually getting out and about. And so the extent to which cats roam does vary substantially from one animal to another. They had one cat in the study that they nicknamed Super Cat. It had an enormous home range of around 200 hectares. But we know some animals are just naturally more wanderers than others, and there are also some landscape scale kind of things that affect that. So cats that are living in more urban areas, the extent to which they wander is less than cats that are in a more rural kind of lower density environment, where they tend to have larger home ranges. In terms of the sort of the how-to and addressing those norms, there's increasingly an amazing amount of information out there, and this is really where the internet is absolutely our friend in this space. So there's great resources from organisations such as the SPCA that are really supportive of keeping cats at home, but really with that absolute lens on how we do that with the cat's welfare front of mind. There are an increasing number of tailor-made products on the market, things like this fencing that cats can't climb over, so you can fence your property for a cat the same way as you would for a dog. And then of course there's good old Kiwi ingenuity with a whole range of different ways in which people give their cats some indoor-outdoor flow or some kind of way to get the stimulation and climbing and that sort of thing that they would normally get outside, to have that indoors. And social media is also a great help in this space as well. So I've got a fangirl cat crush on Bernard of K Road at the moment. Always had a weakness for black cats, and Bernard is super cute, but he's also got this amazing indoor setup that you often see him climbing and running and playing, and it's just fantastic. So he's really great, but there are a number of other examples of indoor cats that have got their own social media profiles, and there are a whole range of different hashtags and search terms that we can be using both to access more information if it's something that we need to find out about, to be able to do these things ourselves, but also a really useful opportunity to be amplifying these things in our own. We're promoting things in our social media that are able to make this more normal and start to bring it into the conversation about what does it mean to be a cat owner in Aotearoa. And another final pet ownership behaviour I look at tonight is this more recent research come out that shows that having a high meat protein diet and having that enrichment kind of object play, both of those things seem to have some kind of role in satiating the probably the nutritional and behavioural instinct to hunt, and so they do appear to reduce cats' hunting instinct for wildlife somewhat. So and again, like these other things, really protective for the wildlife, but also obviously best for the cat's well-being as well. So another win-win opportunity. So in my job, I spend a lot of time talking with people who want to talk to other people about cats, and sometimes that can be quite a challenging conversation for some people to navigate. And so we've spent a bit of time looking at, well, how can we do that more constructively, and how can we help other people to do that more constructively? And so one of the first things to be really keeping in the front of our minds in this space is that we're fundamentally irrational as people. So I know climate change is real, but I still do things which will contribute to climate change because somehow irrationally I don't completely override those things. And so it's well documented that fact provision alone doesn't result in the behaviour change that corresponds with that knowledge. So we have to go beyond kind of thinking that if we give people information about predation, that necessarily people are going to act differently as a result. I often hear conservationists saying to me, well, we just need to tell the cat owners that about this dotterel or whatever, and they'll definitely feel differently about it and they'll act differently. They won't necessarily, even if they understand the issue. We also have to be really mindful that our audience is different from us, and we can't turn our audience into ourselves. And so it's really important to find common ground and establish some kind of relationship. So at the beginning of this talk, I introduced myself both as a cat owner and as somebody who likes to get out into the outdoors and appreciate Indigenous biodiversity. And that's because I am in that way humanising myself and making a connection with the kinds of people who I expect to be in the audience this evening. And so that is an example of the sorts of things that we can be considering, and whether it's a big presentation or whether it's just a casual conversation with somebody, just one-on-one, having that, finding that common ground. It might be nothing to do with cats, it might be the fact that you both like soccer or the same kind of books, but that relationship stuff is really foundational to actually then being able to have your message heard effectively. And we have to think about who are effective messengers, and it may be that in a lot of instances people like me aren't good messengers for some of these conversations, because I work in biosecurity. There's a real connotation around pests and that sort of thing, which can be quite confronting and isn't necessarily useful and helpful in this conversation. Whereas on the other hand, we know that vets are really well thought of, really well respected, great messengers for anything to do with companion animals. And so we need to really look to our vets. So hi Alex, nice to actually see a face to a name online. Yeah, but so vets have a really great role to play in this kōrero. But there will be other messengers who will be appropriate depending on who your conversation is with. You know, so different parts of your community will have different messengers who will be effective. And we also need to pay attention to the words and the images that we're using with our messaging. So it's a whole range of things that we can do that will be helpful, or in some cases less helpful, in terms of getting a positive recognition of the kinds of messages that we're wanting. So things that are more helpful are things like recognising the value that cats have, you know, accepting that that is a positive part of the conversation, and not sort of being dismissive of it. Things that reinforce collective norms, so things that suggest that this is what we all do. We see the government, maybe not so much in the last week or two, but through a lot of the COVID response, you know, they've been really effective at using this kind of collective norms and storytelling language, where they're really reminding us that we're a team of 5 million and this is how we all behave. That sort of thing is really helpful at getting people to come along on the journey with you. Emotion can be useful, or if we get it wrong, it can be less useful, but you know, we need to think really carefully about how we use language in that space. And something which is really helpful is focusing on agency and where people can make a difference. So just like climate change, sometimes it can feel that we can't make a change. I can't keep my cat indoors. It doesn't like it. It can't adjust. Yeah, and so if we can focus on the things where people can make a difference, then that's really, really helpful. And focusing more broadly on the solution rather than anything, the negative things. And so here's an example. This is not an endorsement of the product, but just off the internet, an example of some messaging in the space that is actually really doing a good job. They're ticking a lot of these boxes of focusing on the solution, really nice, happy looking cat, lots of positive collective norming kind of words. On the other hand, there are things that we can do which are less helpful to achieving what we want to achieve. So when we say things like, you know, cats hunt and that's just what they do, when we have these photos of the prowling animal, we're playing into that social norm that says it's natural for cats to hunt, and so that's inevitable and there's nothing we can do to change that. If we instead try just subtle language shifts, like saying, if we let our cats out to roam, we're suggesting there's an agency here. So you have the power to decide whether your cat is going to go out and roam or not. It also breaks down that sort of prevailing norm. And the flip side again of we want people to focus on the solution. So the converse of that is that it's not very helpful to be focusing on the problem. So there's things like this doc fact sheet where it's all about cats being pests and the problems that they are. It's quite confronting. If you're a cat owner, and I know from personal experience of having inadvertently caused people to feel this way, that actually it's not helpful to the conversation to be using this kind of negative framing. It's also not helpful to say what you're not. So as soon as you say, I'm not anti-cat or anything like that, then what people hear is, oh, maybe you are anti-cat. Does somebody think you're anti-cat? Maybe you are anti-cat. So you put an idea into people's minds that they hadn't necessarily thought. And there's plenty of evidence that that shows that when we hear a negative, actually it makes us more likely to think that it is true rather than that it isn't. When we're looking to amplify these kinds of stories, the media can be a really useful avenue, and certainly that's the case for some of these really positive good news stories, like the cats that have been reunited with their owners. It's really a great opportunity to have this conversation in public, to be breaking down those norms and showing people the solution that we're keen on. I think what's a little bit more problematic is when we're using the media to amplify bad news stories. So I wouldn't say don't do it, but I think it's worth thinking carefully about a media tendency. Obviously not all members of the media, but there is a tendency for that sort of polarisation, wanting the conflict. And you see the language that's used in these examples where it's very negative and it's likely to play into that kind of conflict narrative. excuse me. And similarly, the images that we use matter alongside the words that we use. So again, having positive images of happy cats, cats that are indoors, being interacted with. We've got good responsible owners who are paying them attention and loving them, and they look relaxed and happy. Those are really helpful, positive images. Less helpful are those images that are more confronting, showing that predation, showing things that really just reinforce that kind of narrative that this is inevitably what cats do, and it's just natural that that's going to happen. So just to finish up, this is an example of a Department of Conservation trial that they did a few years ago, where they had 3 different brochures that were all having some information about keeping cats at home. And one of them was just a really neutral, fact-laden brochure, and the other 2 produced basically it's the same content but packaged up in a way that's designed to be more focused on some of these behaviour change techniques I've just been talking about. And so one of them using the vet as a messenger, and another using a cute little girl who likes to have the cat stay at home on the bed at night. And they found that both of these 2 types of brochures made people feel significantly more like this is something that they would want to do, rather than the much more neutral sort of fact-laden brochure. And I know that on Waiheke, actually, you've got some amazing collaborations going already between your various organisations operating there who we've got represented tonight, and I've seen some wonderful collateral that's really doing a lot of the right things already. So, you know, I think you've got an exciting opportunity to really do some great things in this space. So I'll leave it there. I think this is, you know, it's a fantastic opportunity to have this conversation, but it's obviously it's an issue that there's no quick fix. It's you know, something that we're going to be slowly chipping away at with people's behaviour over a long period of time. But it's really nice to see this positive, constructive narrative that's coming out more and more, I think, of people's interested in engaging in this topic. Thank you.
Kia ora, Imogen. Thank you for that fascinating kōrero. There were a lot of things in there that I, for one, was not aware of, and it's really exciting to see all of that positive messaging and ways of being able to reach out to people. We have had a couple of pārtai come through. The first one is, do you think if cost were added to that list of motivators, it might be a powerful thinking point for some people? For example, reducing vet bills from fights and accidents, etc.
Yeah, well, quite possibly. And so those motivators that I mentioned were, so they're taken from the 5-yearly report on companion animals in New Zealand. And so I'd have to go back and have a look at the methodology, but I think they're asking a sort of a standard set of questions that they presumably think that people you know, are expecting to be answering along those lines. But yeah, I think that absolutely cost. I feel like it might have been in their report anyway. I'd have to go back and check. But yeah, it's absolutely a contribution to say that the savings that come along with not having a cat producing lots of kittens. Yeah, definitely.
Kia ora. The other question that's also come through, sorry, that question was from Vivian, and we've also got another question here from Vivian, which is, I'd like to know if there is any work being done at LGNZ, which I'm assuming is that local government, or individual councils with regard to ensuring catios and fencing options are within council bylaws and allowed by developers within covenants?
So not that I'm aware of. I mean, my personal view on this is that although those sorts of bylaws are really common in parts of Australia, I think that we're at a point where these things are really very unusual in New Zealand's cat ownership trends at the moment. And so typically when we use regulation for things, it's usually if we think, well, most people will do this, but there's a small proportion of people who won't do it willingly, and this is something that we need to sort of mop up those unwilling. So I think that it's more appropriate for us to be looking at how can we help people to have access to these sorts of things and bring the willing with us, and really that we're not at that point of sort of needing to use regulation to get a small proportion of unwilling over the line. That's my view, and I would say that will be likely why it doesn't seem to be something that's really in the conversation at the moment.
Well, kia ora. Kia ora, Imogen. I'm just mindful of our time, and we do have a couple more questions in here which I would like to move over to our panel discussion, which you will also be in. So Imogen and Brian will be joined by Glenda, Alex and Karen for the panel discussion. So thanks so much, Imogen. That was really fascinating. I think that, you know, with the predator-free work here that's been done on Waiheke, particularly with Te Korowaio Waiheke and many other amazing organisations on Waiheke, we are just seeing an abundance of wildlife and some birds that have really significantly come back. That's been really noticeable, especially lately as we've entered into kind of breeding season. And so I feel that people are really starting to get excited about our wildlife and what it's taking to support that and all of that coming back. So thank you so much for your kōrero. And I'd like to now invite Brian, if you're there, to now come on to the webinar and to share with us. So just as a reminder, Brian Shields is a biodiversity advisor, pest detection dogs, and he has a presentation for us as well. Kia ora, Brian.
All right. So, yeah, my talk's a little bit, I've got a lot of slides about some of our dogs that work in the conservation field. You know, my background a bit is I've trained dog for about the last 30 odd years. I was a professional hunter for DOC for many years, and I was part of rangitoto and mototapu eradication with DOC, and we did the dog checks at the end to make sure everything had gone, and that was quite an exciting you know, project to be on, and but also alarming in a couple of ways. Talked to a lot of people after they'd done the eradication, and especially yachties, said the island's just changed in the sense it's just got thicker. You know, the bird life was there, and it's coming back. But besides that, we decided in Izzy Bay there's lots of boats go there on a Friday and Saturday, and we decided let's get in the boat and have a look and talk to these people around, you know, conservation, and, you know, see if they had any animals. And I think that night there was 32 boats in the little inlet there, and out of the 32 boats there was 9 dogs and 3 cats on those boats. So it just shows you that there's lots of people taking dogs out on their boats, and that becomes a bit of a problem for when they want to relieve themselves, and most times at night they would do that under the stealth of night. The problem we lay at the moment is in the Gulf, and I'm talking about the Gulf, just not Waiheke at the moment, but is there's so many dog owners and that have dogs on boats, and very little places they can actually stop off and relieve their dogs. A couple of scenarios. Pakatoa, Nigel on Pakatoa rang me and said, I've just had this lady turn up. I've got a big sign saying wildlife here, birds nesting, no dogs. And he watched this lady came in, an older lady, Rowan with her dog, got out. He managed to intercept her and say, what are you doing? You're not allowed your dog here. Here's the sign. He said, oh, sorry, I didn't see it. So he watched her get in the boat, row around to the next bay, get in to the shore. He went around there and said, what are you doing? She said, well, you've got no sign here. you know, so there's quite a bit of, you know, and with the council, I think it's a good point to say the council, we're really struggling to tell people where they can actually go and relieve their dogs within the Gulf. There's no islands, you know, if we told every boatie who are out in the Gulf that they can go ashore on Waiheke and relieve their dogs, that would have a backlash on, you know, from Waihekeans. And same with the Rakino is another island as well. So really struggling at that point. And then responsible ownership around dogs. I've got the slide here. And this was taken on Rangitoto and Motatapu. And this is, you know, everyone just enjoying the day, a couple of jet skis, you know, a boat, having a little bit of a picnic, but then the dogs chasing after, you know, birds on the beach, which is quite common. This is a really quite a powerful, for us, a powerful sort of slide in the sense it's a pest-free island. These people are enjoying their boating, oblivious to it's been a pest-free island and allowing the dog to do that. So how do you find the balance between, you know, the dog behaving itself and the people enjoying what the Gulf has got there? Because that's typical of people enjoying it, and so they should enjoy it. But that comes through as responsibilities around the enjoyment side of it as well. I think Imogen really hit home the struggle that we have too, is that not everyone, when we're in the conservation window or box, if you like to say, people outside that don't really care. So though we're passionate about the birds, the wildlife, you know, the bush, the sea and all that, some people just don't care. So I always put it up there as it's like somebody driving, you know, along the road, seeing a bush block and going, yeah, that's a bush block. Next week they go along, that's a bush block. Next week they go along, that's a bush block. They look at it like that, and then they don't realise until it's actually gone that they've lost something, you know. So how do you get to those people that it's really important around dogs, wildlife, and you know, it takes a huge effort, because we've got lots of different dogs in lots of different ways. And what I mean around that is, like, there's hunting dogs. So there's people that hunt with dogs. There's people that do shows with dogs. There's agility. There's all sorts of things. There's companion dogs, all really close to what, you know, to people's hearts and passionate about their dogs. Yeah, so how they work together. So what we do with our dogs is a lot of stimulation and they'll bring the slide up. This is Pip, it's a carry dieback dog. So there's lots of stimulation in their training. To train a conservation dog takes about 3.5 years. Pip is one of our carry dieback dogs that we've developed. We're 2 years into that project. We've got good results. But these dogs have got to work amongst some really endangered animals. You know, they hunt, you know, especially our rodent dogs. They hunt. They've got to work amongst wildlife, and you've got to be 100% sure that they're not going to go and take anything out. And the way we do that is basically positive reinforcement, just expose them to lots of different environments, and stimulate them. And I think that's the secret of good ownership of a dog as well, that people getting the right dog for their situation. You know, people normally buy dogs because they're cute, but that dog, cute dog, might be a hunting dog, and it might need a lot of stimulation, but they've got a property that's very small, and they don't take the dog out for a lot of work, exercise and stuff like that. So you end up in a lot of situation where the dog's just, when it gets off, it just runs. So how we bring that in is about education. Like I said, we're at the start of trying to do that around the dogs within the Gulf and responsible ownership, giving people, you know, the knowledge that, you know, there's bird aversion that you can do for your dog, them tapping into that, knowing your dog, that's a really strong one for me. So people know their dog and know if it's a little bit of a problem child and how you manage that. Seek out, you know, some professional training around that. You know, if the dog's got no recall, you've got to teach it recall, because that's the secret of bringing dogs in most of the time. Again, buying the right dog for your situation. You know, I thought it would be, you know, some of these dogs now are fetching, crossbreeds are fetching huge amounts of money. So, you know, that sort of, you know, the breeds all mixed up. Some have got hunting in, some have got, you know, terrier breeds, and they just want to hunt around that. And this slide here, did I bring it? Is one when I was on the Antipodes with my dog, Pippi and Tui. And this is, you know, we have to walk all through here, search all up through those rocks and that. And, you know, and this one here is wandering albatross, and over here there's Perry and Pippi there. So to work and do a good job of that, your dog's got to be really bulletproof. And we train them to a pretty high standard. The reason we wear muzzles is because a dog, in my eyes, is 99% proof. Like I could say, you know, each of my dogs, 99% won't do anything to wildlife, but there's always that 1%. So part of their, to work on conservation land and in these sort of places, they must wear a muzzle as well. So that's something that we don't see a lot on dogs in the public. These dogs are comfortable wearing a muzzle, and it's something that we could probably promote around, you know, public dogs in certain areas, that when they go out, they can wear a muzzle, that sort of thing. This is one of our another carried eyeback dogs, Mawhai, as a pup, and this is him now. He's a Judd Terrier German hunting dog with a huge prey drive, and it's taken quite a bit to get him into a really balanced dog, because most of these dogs are really balanced. Yeah, so responsible ownership is something that we're really struggling with, and how do we do it? I don't really have all the answers myself. There's you know, cats are really well researched of where they go and what they do, but the impact of dogs actually on the wildlife is not recorded that much, apart from we know that they take a lot of kiwi out. I do a Pātiki aversion on Great Barrier, and we do that every 6 months. So that's they've got a huge, Great Barrier is a real stronghold of Pātiki. So we go out there and we set up a scenario for the local dogs and dogs coming out, and we take them through that. And one of the questions is, you know, when I have people come up to me, it won't touch Pātiki, but it's eaten all my chickens. You know, can we do chicken aversion? You know, that sort of stuff. So if your dog is taking out chickens, it's going to definitely take out, you know, some of the wildlife around that. Those areas which we, you know, can be quite devastating for a dog that's not, you know, kept in. And I think, you know, it's got to be lobbied within, you know, the local boards and stuff like that, that responsible ownership for dogs, and that's around keeping them in at night, making sure they're well-being, fed, and controllable. I see so many dogs when I just go for a walk that aren't under control, no recall, and how do you get to those people and talk to them about, you know, responsible ownership. And once again, I don't think there's enough out there to give people help around responsible dogs, and that comes from, you know, the right dog for the right person, right environment. I think there should be a little bit of more legislation around significant areas, and what's involved in that. Yeah, and I got this photo. This is Mahuki with a little barrier on the background. This is the sort of stuff that dogs do. Again, working amongst all these gannets, and just working through them is a lovely thing to see, and well behaved and balanced. So for me, I'm not sure. I'm a bit of a loss of how responsible ownership should be. I have my version of what a responsible ownership, and I'm passionate about training dogs to a really high level. But I also understand that people some people can't do that or don't want to do that, and how you know. So my talk's around sort of what are the answers. We don't have all the answers for those questions, you know. We do, like, again, we do a lot around cats, but I think dogs do a lot of damage in certain areas of New Zealand. And if one got out onto an island like Rangitoto or Motutapu and got away, there'd be huge damage there. But also for the stuff that you guys are doing on Waiheke, you're getting all these birds back. It just takes one ruthless dog overnight to sort of take so much of your hard work and undo that. And how you control that, again, is a really hard thing for us to do. So we're struggling a little bit around, you know, putting the right information out around that. We've got compliance, and because people don't like compliance, they think, and I think it's what Imogen said in her talk there, you know, bringing out the right language to people around responsible dog ownership, and that's got to come within the community of what they want around responsible ownership and what they expect from people's dogs. And we're doing that with cats, but we're not that proactive of doing it around dogs. The industry is huge. I think it's $400 billion a year that overall across the board for pets. And so there's a lot of money there. Not much of that goes back into sort of education side of things. I'll just bring up another slide. So I'm just bringing up some slides of the dogs working. This is a trip that we went on a couple of years ago to the Antipodes, and this is coming in with the Navy. Dropped us off we were down there for a month, which was a lifetime experience for me as a dog handler, being in the, you know, one of our, well, it is our furthest away island from New Zealand, for a month with a whole lot of people, 10 people, which were really cool. And just watching the dogs work, and they made a really good documentary on that as well. So some really nice photos here of the night, at night on the Antipodes. And then we've got, bring this one up, that's an Antipodes parakeet, which is endemic to down there. It's only found in that particular area. And of course the wandering albatross. What hit me home with this one, when we turned up, there was a scientist there who said, if we carry on with our fishing practices, we'll lose this bird in 20 years, you know, just through fishing. And that's in one of our far off islands. And then this one here, the parakeet again, which is our biggest parrot. Yeah, so it's around education. It's around, you know, good ownership of dogs. It's got to come from within of what's expected around, you know, your environment of there. There's not that many rules at the moment, apart from, you know, don't take your dog on this part of the beach, don't take your dog on that part of the beach. And when those things are put in place, birds can move into areas where there's dogs. So suddenly you've got an area where people can take dogs. So being proactive in lobbying the council, this is now an area where we've got lots of birds. We need to do something, change the you know, where the dogs can go. There's lots of places where dogs can go that aren't there. Bringing out more, you know, when a dog says on a lead, how many times have we been to a beach where there's a you know, lead only and there's just dogs everywhere? So, you know, more compliance around backing that message up is needed as well.
That's a really good point, Brian. I remember last year in lockdown, Oneroa Beach, which is one of our most popular dog beaches here on Waiheke, I think it was a couple of weeks into lockdown, there was a council sign that popped up on the beach saying dotterels are nesting here, which I'd never seen before. So it was actually quite incredible how quickly they came back once they had the space to do so. And so that was during the level 4 lockdown. Yeah, some incredible images there. Is that a rock hopper?
Yeah, that one is, yeah.
I love that.
I think the big thing for me is that we're moving pretty quick in conservation, and as you're saying, you're seeing the results on Waiheke of all the hard work that's happened over the last few years, but we're not moving with the times around protecting it a little bit, and how do we look after that asset? Our team in the Pathways team, we do a lot around biosecurity of barges and stuff going out there. We search stuff going to, you know, Waiheke. We've got the carry dieback dogs to try and do some, you know, biosecurity checks with them of material and diggers going out there. But actually on the island, you know, around responsible ownership, I don't think it's far advanced with dogs as it is with cats. And I'm just not sure who takes that up and how we actually get that forward. We know, we've talked about it, we've had lots of meetings. It's a real hard basket because there's so many avenues where dogs can come in and come out, and very few rules. There's nothing to say that you can't take your dog on a boat and then just drop it off on Waiheke and does its business and get back on your boat, you know. To me, that feels a little unfair for Waihekeans, you know, around that, yeah.
That's a really good point. And one of the messages that I did put across to some of the kaitiaki over here to do with our korora was an example that I had heard from Ngāti Korora, which is a hapu up in the north, where they've been doing a lot of observations and monitoring of the little blue penguins, and took out was like 3/4 of the population that they've been monitoring in one go. So we don't need to wait for it to happen here. We can use those stories from different hapu and iwi and communities to inform people on our island of just how destructive one event can be, but also about, I really loved what Imogen was saying about really pushing that positive messaging and building that aroha and that connection for our wildlife, so that we really want to make sure that we're protecting it the best we can. I see we've got a question here from Sharon that's come through for you, Brian. And she says, thank you. Is it possible, desirable, to encourage people to leave their dogs at home when they come away on the boat or come to Waiheke for the weekend? We have examples of people losing their cats on the island, dogs here for the weekend, potentially harming them, biting fledgling birds, running them on dog prohibited beaches around the Gulf, etc. So I guess
I'm quite passionate about dogs on boats because I own dogs. I just don't see the mix. You know, even for a day, you know, taking your dog out, you're out there enjoying the golf. Why would you take the dog? But then it gets back to what Imogen was saying, is that, you know, everyone thinks differently, and we've got to get on that page of why we think differently. To us, it's sort of like, yeah, shouldn't really do it, but to somebody else, it's like, quite like to take Pooch along with us and do a bit of fishing, has a bit of fun, jumps in the water. You know, it's a really hard one, and compliance is really black and white. You know, like you said before, it's about education, it's about what you're protecting within your area. So the compliance doesn't actually fit to everywhere. You know, and it's very hard to enforce. You know, I live in the Waitakeris, I take my dogs to this particular track that you're allowed dogs. It says, you know, lead only. You're walking down there and there's 20 dogs off the lead. We've just spent millions of dollars propping up those tracks for carry dieback. We've got to keep within the track, but the dogs are running either side of each track, you know, into the bush and back onto the track and stuff like that. How do you get through to people, you know? Yeah, it's a hard one.
Well, kia ora, Brian. That was such a fantastic presentation, an important kōrero for us all to be having. I'm just looking at our time and wanting to move us on to a panel discussion, which you'll also be a part of, along with Imogen and also Glenda. Thank you so much for joining us from WISCA here on the island. So if you can stop sharing your screen there, Brian, please, and then we'll be able to bring everyone up onto the screen. And perhaps it's a good opportunity for Glenda, Alex, and Karen, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves to those that are on the call, and then we'll get into some questions that are coming through. So Glenda, I'll ask you to go first. Kia ora.
Hi there, I'm Glenda. I'm the animal advocate for WISCA, so that's Waiheke Island Society for the Care of Animals, and we deal with pretty much anything, any type of animal on the island, as well as rehoming and education and welfare issues.
Kia ora, Glenda. Alex.
I'm Alex. I'm one of the vets and also owner of Vets on Waiheke. And I guess we come across a lot of those issues on a daily basis as well.
Kia ora, Alex. Kia ora, Karen.
Kia ora, and thank you everyone. That was really amazing and really informative. My name's Karen Saunders and I'm a wildlife rehabilitator with Native Bird Rescue on Waiheke Island. So we rescue, rehabilitate and hopefully release birds. And I get to see firsthand the broken bleeding birds from dog and cat interactions.
Kia ora, Karen. So one of the questions that we have here, I'm just going to leave it open for whoever would like to answer. But one of them is what are some other education opportunities within the Waiheke community for pet owners? So this one is probably, well, it's probably for all of you, but particularly for those of you that are on the island. What are some of the opportunities that you think we could be using a little bit more?
One of the ones that we do use is the puppy preschool, which is run through Vets on Waiheke. And that is a real place where I take the puppy classes, and it's a real opportunity to actually educate people on how to train their dogs properly, and obviously all the things around conservation as well. It's more than just teaching a puppy to be social, but actually to educate owners a lot as well. So that is a really good way. I think going forward, what we do need and what people are looking for is probably more what Brian does, maybe somebody to come over and do aversion training for people who have older dogs. And I think that's probably something that we could do more of on the dog side. And then obviously social media is something else that we need to use more of.
Kia ora, Glenda. Is there anyone else that wanted to ask?
I could add something, and not wanting to detract from, you're absolutely right. It's probably better answered by people who are on the island than me, and I confess to not having a really great sense of all the detail about what's happening locally. But something that I know that we're looking at regionally is to increase our sort of package of engagement through our, so another part of the department that I work with sustainability in schools, and so they support teachers to be able to teach about sustainability issues, and so they're looking at how they can support teachers to have curriculum-based packages around this kind of kaupapa, and I know similarly that the SPCA have a curriculum-based piece of work, or actually a number of them that are relevant for tonight's conversation. So that's, I don't know to what extent that sort of thing's really happening on your schools on Waiheke, but if it's not, and any of you have got connections with the schools, that might be something that you'd be interested in exploring more.
Kia ora, Imogen. Another question that's come through here is saying that it is not being mentioned risks to human health. Do you have the details on kids permanently losing sight from infected cat feces spreading toxoplasmosis? A child at Waiheke Play Centre lost some of his sight in one eye. Keeping cats on your property protects your neighbours. Is there anybody that knows about this?
Right, yeah, I wouldn't be aware of that. I think as far as I'm concerned, the biggest issue around toxoplasmosis would be for pregnant women. Yes, yeah, no, I haven't heard of that, but I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I think something I could add to that is I think you're absolutely right, Alex, that the most severe risk around toxoplasmosis is for pregnant women, and similarly in other animals we see that pregnancy is a real time of risk. So actually in other wildlife like dolphins, at increased risk of abortion as well if they're infected with toxoplasmosis, which, believe it or not, does get into the marine environment. There's actually a substantial body of literature that shows that although pregnant women are at the most risk of that sort of really acute phase of toxoplasmosis, there is also a much more sort of chronic effect of it at the population level, because once you've had it, it basically sort of sits in your brainstem or wherever it is for basically forever, and so it is associated with some chronic long-term risk taking and other chronic health issues, but I think I'm not aware of it being related to an eyesight thing, but I feel like there's some other kind of horrible parasite thing that you can get from cats that does cause blindness, but I don't know the details of that. I'd say it would be fairly unusual though.
Yeah, I was just going to come back to something that you mentioned when you were doing your introduction, Karen, and that's that you obviously are on the end of some of these injuries that are inflicted on our taonga species and our wildlife and our native birds. What are some of the what are some of these manu coming in with, and are there specific things that you believe there needs to be more education in the Waiheke community?
Yes. So what we do is we aim, a bit like what Imogen was saying, is to create connection with the wildlife. So a cat owner that brings, like we had a baby tui come in yesterday. It's pretty badly injured. So what we do is we raise that tui and we take it back to their property to release it. So they then are responsible for that wildlife, and we create a connection during the journey. So we share little videos of, this is it the first time it's fluttering its wings. This is it, when it's hopping around. Now it's flying. And they're like, but we've got cats. We can't have this tui home. But we say that's where it's from. That's where its whānau are. It has to come home. So you're now not just responsible for your cat that you love, but for this tui, which we hope to create a connection with that tui for those people. So the other thing we educate people on all the time is cats have pathogens in their mouth. I had my cousin's friend, her baby daughter died of a cat bite. So it can be quite fatal. So they have one pathogen called Pasteurella multicida. So if you get one puncture wound in a bird, that bird's dead in 24 hours. Now, I love cats, and I've had a lot of cats in my life, and I look back and I think, oh my God, all those birds I let go thinking they were okay, they probably went away and died. So we just educate people around that side of it. And about catios, if you're going to get a cat, think about an indoor cat. And a bit like Imogen says, it's about keeping your cat really safe as well. I've had one cat die of a traffic injury, another cat from a cat fight. So Imogen's presentation was amazing, thank you. The other one we get is dogs. Once again, you can see Vote Korora, which is Bird of the Year promotion here. So we've had 2 korora in the last week come in, and sadly what happens is dogs love the smell of them. And it's like all seabirds, they have a really high intense smell, and people can't keep their dog under control. A bit like what Brian was saying, I grew up, my father was a dog trainer, so we always had anywhere between like 6 and 14 dogs that he was training. And it's very rare, I realized when I left home, that dogs were actually trained. And after growing up that way, I was just shocked and horrified that people couldn't even get their dog to come to them. So what I would like to see and what we promote is like beach ambassadors and people around the coastline that start to connect and know their wildlife. They know where the korora are nesting. They know where the oyster catchers, where they roam, where they go. And when they see people with dogs off leash, they can just say, hey, have you seen our neighbours here? These are our wild neighbours. Like, we've got to look after them too. They're nesting at the moment, they're feeding their young, and your dog's exhausting them. I know he's having fun, but could you run him on the field over there? So that's what we would like to promote. Yeah, that's probably it from me.
Oh, that sounds amazing. It just gave me a bit of a flashback to the Future Search, which was an incredible part of the Waiheke Marine Project. And they were talking about, you know, they've got amazing mana whenua engagement with Ngāti Pāua. And they were talking about, at one point, Pāua ranges. And it sounds like something that's kind of like the Beach Ambassador program. And I just think that that's fantastic to raise awareness and you know, like you say, just get people excited about our wildlife. I'll just put this question to the panel. And thank you, Karen, for that. Do you have any advice for people considering getting a new pet? How can they make sure they are making good choices for flora and fauna?
I think one of the main things, especially with the dog, is what Brian was saying, was researching the breed, understanding the breed and making sure that the breed fits their lifestyle and they're prepared to put the work in for the breed. Because a lot of people do just get a dog because it's cute or because they think it's fun or funky. And it actually has a really strong prey drive, especially the like border terriers and those kind of things that people think are just cool because they're quite small, but they're really hard dogs to manage. And I think that is something that people really don't quite think about that much, and whether they move around a lot. A lot of people are renting on the island, so they move around a lot, and they don't have properties that have fences, so the dogs are not contained as well. So I think that's quite a big consideration as well, whether they can keep the animal indoors when they need to. Same with the issue with the dogs on the boat thing. If you look at the other side of that, potentially it is because people don't have fenced properties and they're going out for the whole day or 24 hours and they don't want to leave the dog at home, so they take it on the boat. So that's quite a big consideration if you are a boatie and that kind of thing. Choosing a house or having a place where the dog can actually stay that fits your lifestyle. If you're out every day and you're going to leave the dog alone to roam and that kind of thing is obviously really important. And then I guess be prepared to do the training. And a lot of the training is about starting the way you want to finish. So making sure that the animals get proper training, but also often that we reinforce the behaviors just without knowing it. We often create the triggers. And I see that quite a lot in puppy school, that people train their dogs. When we're teaching recall, they'll say, come, 10 times. So the dog learns to come on the 10th time instead of the first time. So just understanding actual dog behavior and actually training better would help. Obviously, when we are on a beach, people think it's fun for the dog to chase seagulls, not teach a dog to chase seagulls. So often we encourage the behavior that we actually want to prevent without even realizing. And a lot of people do that. They're actually creating the triggers without knowing it. So yeah, it's quite important to be prepared to do the training if you want to get particularly a dog.
Kia ora, Glenda. Alex, you obviously have you know, first-hand experience with most of our animals, including my precious little dog Puriri. Do you have anything to add to that, just in terms of your experience in the animals that you're seeing come in, or anything that people should think about if they're thinking about getting a new pet, specifically on Waiheke?
Well, I mean, thanks to Karen, we don't see all that many birds anymore, because like obviously the word got out that she's the first contact point. I mean, we're always there in the background if further things need to happen. I guess we probably deal mostly with cat bite abscesses and cat fights, cat fight wounds and more stuff like that. So I guess going back to Imogen's presentation, they often do happen during the night, I'd say. So I think it would be just a good thing if cats maybe right from the start can be kind of like get used to staying inside, like especially if you get a kitten. I think it's very challenging once the cat is kind of older and it's been out all its life to all of a sudden kind of lock it in. I think that's what I find. I mean, and I just speak from experience. I mean, we got cats as well. They're not been ours, so we rehomed them at the age of 10. And when we moved, it was literally an impossible task to keep them inside. Like, I thought my window is going flying. So they can be really determined. So I think it is easier if when you do have a kitten to kind of get them used to being maybe inside at least during the night.
Yeah, awesome. Good friend of mine, maybe she got that advice from you, Alex. She's got 2 cats now, and since she got them, they have stayed in at night, and it was actually the first time I'd ever heard of that. So that's really good advice. We've got another question here that's come through from Robin Cairns. It's generally unacceptable for dogs to wander, but we seem very lax with cats. On Vancouver Island in Canada, the town of Nanaimo has passed a bylaw last month making it illegal for a cat to wander beyond the owner's property. What does the panel think? Any comments on that one?
It's going to be a difficult one.
I know.
That's a bit tricky, but like Alex says, I think the biggest thing and what we advocate as well at WISCA is when we are adopting out animals, the adoption process, screening and sort of education around before giving anybody a cat is, are you prepared to do this? Are you prepared to do that? And obviously recommending that the cats do stay indoors at night. With the motivator that they're less likely to get into fights, they're less likely to get lost, less stressful, and obviously less impact on the wildlife. But there's no way of really keeping them on the property if you weren't locking them indoors. That's going to be really hard for people, because short of putting up those fancy fences, that's not really going to happen. We can't even get people to contain dogs with a fence, so to contain a cat is going to be real tricky. Only thing would be the keeping completely indoors, and obviously desexing and microchipping is absolutely vital. From our point of view at WISCA, microchipping is like, it gives me heart attacks, because if you find an animal that has gone stray, microchipping, if it's microchipped, you can get it reunited so quickly. So the quicker you can get an animal reunited with an owner, the less impact it can have on the environment. So keeping it on the property is one thing. If it's going to get off the property and potentially going to get to a point where it wanders too far and gets lost and then causes damage to the environment, it could get picked up quite easily and reunited if it was microchipped. But yeah, I think that's one of the considerations as well.
And just on that, a question that's come through for you, Imogen, from Sharon, and that was, could you please tell us a bit more about the Snip and Chip and that initiative, Waiheke?
Oh yeah, well, so there's not a huge amount to tell at the moment. We're pretty early days, but yeah, so it's a little bit affected by COVID. So obviously the vets are quite constrained about what surgeries they can do at the moment, but we hope that once we're in a suitable alert level, there'll be level 2, that they'll be able to do snip and chips, and that will be free, which is a cost that's shared between Auckland Council and the vets. It may be that we're able to take bookings before we get to level 2 and book them in with a bit of a waiting list, but we just have to, I think like everything in these strange times, we just have to be a little bit flexible about how that rolls out. But you'll see some more, we'll be able to do a bit more publicity around it when that's ready to happen. So yeah. And I think also there was a question earlier about the containment that I misanswered, right? That actually the question was about consenting in relation to whether bylaws would make consents, make it possible for people to put up cat fences and things. I wondered if I could talk to that in relation to that conversation you were just having around whether it's possible to keep cats indoors and or on the property. And you know, as I said earlier, I think, you know, we're not at the point of mandating cats staying on their property like that place in Vancouver Island, or indeed lots of parts of Australia, but there's certainly opportunities to improve rates of people keeping the cats at home, and it is, as Glenda said, it can be really challenging. I think when you've got a new kitten, that's a really great opportunity to get them accustomed to having an indoor lifestyle. But there are ways that you can fence all or part of your property to keep cats in, astonishing though that might seem, and so that's something that I think there is potential for greater uptake of, in respect of how that's affected by bylaws around what you can and can't build on your property. Generally, the actual fences are just really, they're just a sort of a spinny thing that goes on the top of just your ordinary fence that you might have. So if you've got a fully fenced section for a dog, then you can add the spinny thing on the top and you can keep a cat indoors. I imagine that they're a bit pricey if you buy the sort of commercial ones, but there are also DIY versions that you can create to sort of have that same effect yourself. So I don't see any problem, I would imagine, with the caveat that I'm not an expert in building consents stuff, but to my knowledge, I would say that mostly they wouldn't be a problem. But I think it's definitely true that some of the catio type things, you know, there is a bit more of a challenge about having structures that are consentable and also that actually are going to be safe and sound and not sort of damage parts of your house. So if you're wanting to go down that road, I think it's something you need to look into carefully about making sure that you're going to do it in a way that's going to work properly.
Just following on from that, a question that's come in is, do you think it's a case of having council-led responsible dog or pet workshops, or do you think it's better to have more of a grassroots and community approach to education?
Well, as a council person, I think it's definitely better coming from the community. You know, you know your community, you're members of that community, you've got a positive relationship. Often things that come from council are tarnished with all the baggage of all the other things that people don't like about council. You know, if somebody's had a bad experience with their rates bill or whatever other thing it is, they sort of lump it all in with council. And I think also just as a nation, we've got a bit of a mistrust of government organisations to an extent, and so I think absolutely if these things can come from the community, then it's much better.
I think too, some of the most successful operations have come from community wanting it. So they've got to want it to make the change. Never works for any organisation like the council government to come from the top down. If the community wants it, then it will happen.
Kia ora, Brian. We've got just another question. We'll probably just finish with another couple of questions here. Actually, Karen, this one might be for you. In Kaikoura, they've had to create pens to protect. In Kaikoura, they've had to create pens only to penguins, mainly for protection against dogs. Does the panel consider this a solution or an aid? And have you heard of them? I'm not familiar with them.
No, I haven't heard of those ones yet. I can't imagine how the pens would work because the korora are moving backwards and forwards between the ocean and wherever they're, burrowing that night. So I imagine it would only protect them when they're in there overnight, which most of their burrows are pretty dog-proof anyway, that I know about around our coastline. Yeah.
We've got another question that's come in here, which is about He Ata Whai Whenua, which is, for those of you, all of you who have been to Waiheke or you're on Waiheke, is the beautiful stretch of native forest that goes from Tiatia up towards Oneroa, that's been planted out by our amazing community. So the question is, He Ata Whai Whenua, the Forest and Bird Reserve, is dog on lead and people systematically let their dogs run off lead. If you ask them, they say their dog never chases birds. At the same time, the end of Onitangi Beach is dog prohibited. Do you have any ideas on how to address this? What can be done to raise the importance of respecting the few rules that are there? And I'm also just going to tag on to this another question, which was, do we believe that wharves and or marinas are somewhere that is good for us to be able to educate visitors? So it's kind
on the marina side and the wharf side, that's where our team, Pathways teams, do a huge amount of work. So we're continuously educating people. We have ambassadors down there over the Christmas period. I think there's 22 of them last year, and they're talking to all the cars, all that sort of stuff. And that's where we've seen a real gap that we had around the dogs. So hopefully this year, some of their campaign stuff will be around good ownership of dogs and what to look for. So that's a huge amount of work we actually do. So we cover at this stage, even lockdown, we're covering every barge that goes out to Great Barrier. One of our team is down there with the dog, putting it over there, talking to people, looking for risk loads, and we do quite a bit of that around Waiheke as well. Not as tense at the moment, but we're building up to that as it becomes more pest-free. We put more into that educational side of it. The dog one on the lead for me is a really hard one because it's a compliance issue, and compliance are really black and white of the way they operate, in the sense that they've got to get somebody down there, and it's more, you don't do that, you're not allowed to do that, here's a ticket, which always is probably sometimes not the best of actually educating people there. So maybe an ambassador at the entrance there talking to people about dogs on leads for a period of time might get the message through, because you find most people will take their dogs back to the same spot because they enjoy it and they're comfortable with the dog being there. So yeah, it's a really hard one because we get that. I see it all where I am at the moment as well, up in the Waitaks with dogs just off lead all the time. I like the thing that the dogs never killed a bird on lead, and it's probably never hurt itself on a lead either, so lead's a good thing.
Yeah, and I would add to that. I mean, I think I hear the same thing around cats all the time. People acknowledge that cats and dogs kill birds, but they always think that their dog or cat is special and doesn't. And I think one of the keys to this kind of stuff is some of those sophisticated behaviour change tools that we need to be thinking about. So it's not the fact provision. It'll be the social norm. So when other dog owners are saying and modelling, this is not what we do when we're a dog owner, that people will start to feel, oh yeah, because we're very motivated by social pressure, when we feel like everybody else is doing that, and oh, well, maybe I'd better conform. So, it's those sorts of things. And so I think dog owners, dogs not really my area of expertise, but a lot of the stuff is transferable, right? And I think there's a huge role for dog owners to be actively modelling and having those conversations that show doing the right thing.
Kia ora, Imogen. So we're at time actually, but before we do close, I just wanted to do a round and see, just in terms of information that you've shared, would you each mind letting our watchers know how they may find more information on the work that you're doing or some of the information that you've shared, and what's the best platforms or ways for people to get in touch or find that information? Yeah, Glenda, we'll start with you.
Okay, so we obviously have a website, which is WISCA.co.nz, and then we do stuff through Facebook, which is just WISCA on Facebook. I do have quite a few campaigns planned to do on an education side, which will be on Facebook in the form of videos and little clips and that kind of thing. Also working with the rooster group and the ducks and the geese, and then also doing stuff with different types of animals as well. So that will be on the Facebook, and otherwise I'm available pretty much 24/7 on my mobile phone, which is Facebook, or on the website.
Kia ora, Glenda. Karen.
Yeah, if you come across or you're in situations where you've got, the dogs chasing the dotterels, I get a lot of people phone me. And I just, once again, advise them to use peer support and be great ambassadors for those birds. And a lot of people actually have dogs that call me. So they're the best people to go and talk to other dog owners, in my view. So yeah, I'm happy to take those phone calls. You can also go and have a look at our Facebook page, which is Native Bird Rescue, and our website, which is nativebirdrescue.nz. Yeah. And just remember that these little korora here, they're your wild neighbours. So they might not be your pet or part of your family, but you've got to treat them like your neighbours and look after them. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Kia ora, Karen. Alex.
Same for us, I guess. Website and Facebook. We're kind of in the process of remodeling the Facebook, our website, where we kind of got more opportunity for blogs and stuff, and educational videos. Also, if there are any questions or you need to get in contact with us, it's info@vetsonwaiheke.co.nz.
Kia ora, Alex. Brian.
So Pest-Free Hauraki Golf website is a really good one. It explains what we do, and there's some stuff around the new rules within the golf. The other one is sort of, I think, maybe holding some workshops within, good behaviour of dogs, a practical workshop where people can bring their dogs and have a talk about what the problems might be, would be a really good start. To get people involved, and that would be a good platform to sort of educate people on, the environment where the dogs live as well. But mainly the Pest-Free Hauraki Golf, you can look it up and see what we do. Yeah.
Awesome. Kia ora, Brian. Imogen.
Well, regrettably, we've got a website content that's just not quite up and running at the moment, but in the relatively near future, we'll have a lot of the sort of stuff that I've been talking about tonight will be up on, so a part of Council's website around the natural environment is teakitamaki.nz. And so at the moment that doesn't have that sort of responsible cat ownership platform, but it will have in the relatively near future. And that will be a great place to look.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we've just taken a note of all of that information, and we'll actually email that out to the collective as well for anybody who wants to be able to check out those social media pages or those websites that you've mentioned. So thank you so much for giving us your time this evening and for this incredibly important kaupapa. And I think it's a really exciting future in terms of new pet owners or existing pet owners understanding more, creating that awareness, and maybe us as community members and community organisations really coming together to brainstorm some ideas of how we can raise the awareness of how we love our pets and also love conservation, love our wildlife and love our environment. So thank you so much for coming along. I'm just going to close with a karakia. And we'll be able to share the recording of the webinar this evening online and also via our email, and we'll also send out that information. Manera, he mihi nui tēnei ki a koutou, ngā kai kōrero o te pōnei, he karakia whakamutunga. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua i te aratakata, hoi ara e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga kia tina, tina, haumie, huie, tai kie. Kia ora everybody. Have a great evening and thank you.
Thank you.